Okay. So, like I said, today is all about LinkedIn and maximizing your profile. LinkedIn is kind of has a funny reputation of being like the professional Facebook. And that's a little funny because LinkedIn is technically older than Facebook. It got started back in 2003, but it really is meant to be the platform for you to network with other professionals. But what it's done and how it's evolved so much more than just networking with other professionals is how recruiters are using LinkedIn today. It is actually evolved to be quite a competitive job search site. That means that you have the opportunity to not only share your own professional story on there, but you can look at companies and have how their jobs are posted, and you can actually apply for, directly on LinkedIn. So just like Indeed or Monster, it's becoming a job search site as well as a talent sourcing tool. And so just to kind of get this back, today we're about optimizing our profiles so that recruiters would be able to find us if we're interested in those new opportunities. And then just to kind of keep in mind that this is something that whether you're actively job seeking or you think you might be open to job seeking here in the next year or so, there is a difference between an active job seeker and a passive job seeker. We'll get into that in a little bit, but this is an idea of even if you're not necessarily looking to leave your company or your position in the next year or so, knowing that you might be a good candidate for something down the road is really what we want to prioritize in this conversation. Ultimately, LinkedIn is a search engine. And so that means that throughout my talk today, I'm going to be talking about how you can become more searchable and how that you can understand how LinkedIn will reward its users. At the end of the day, LinkedIn is still a business. And so that means that they want to prioritize its users. The more someone is active on the platform, the more complete your account is. That means the higher your profile will show up in search results. And so LinkedIn likes to reward its users. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. So like I said, today we're really going to get into what it will look like. So the best way to do that is for me to share what my profile looks like. So just by a virtual thumbs up, can everyone see what would be my LinkedIn profile? Just to get some confirmation that you guys can see my screen. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So let's start at the very beginning. So this main section right here is called the profile section. Right off the bat, it's where you would include a headshot. So for your picture, I know that we talked about not including pictures on your resume. It's something that is expected on LinkedIn. That means that you do want to include your headshot or a professional photo on your profile. You'll see that in this profile picture, it's going to be my face or my head is taking up at least 60% of the image. That means that this is not a far away image. It doesn't include multiple people, and it is something that is easily identified and recognized as my own. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. We're going to hear some shameless plugs in here. We do offer professional headshots. And so that's an appointment that you can schedule within our offices. But these are something that, again, it doesn't have to be you have to go to a formal studio, as long as it's something that either your company has taken or that you just have a, that's a very polished presentation of yourself, then that would be what would be considered appropriate. Behind me, you can see that we have the background image. So this one's just something that you have an opportunity to just add to your brand a little bit. For LinkedIn, they do have a series of stock images that you're allowed to upload that they have just provided in there. You can even see that they have, when you go down to, if you wanted to change the photo, it will have the different, fun backgrounds that you can include. There's nothing wrong with including these. We just like to say that if this is a chance for you to enhance your brand, why not take advantage of it? And so that's something that you can kind of utilize. So for what I've chosen to use is Kansas City, just an image of Kansas City that I really liked. It's a little bit more artsy. It's not a photo, it's an actual print that was out there. It just goes in line with my brand, which is where I, help develop students and help cultivate relationships within the city. So I've chosen to do that. You can also change it to be just blank color schemes that might be within line of your company, or how, maybe you have a personal, brand out there. The only thing I'd want to caution you against is, just like every other cover image, something that is this long, wide rectangle, is that if you try to upload a square image, especially if that image has text on it, then it's going to stretch it, and the likelihood of that text getting cut off is higher. I would strongly discourage that, just because it will make you look a little bit tech illiterate. It, like, you don't know how to upload a photo. So just, play it safe, use a standard image, or use one of the provided ones. And that's just a good way of kind of keeping things, just colorful, like how LinkedIn wants you to. This takes up a good chunk of real estate, so we might as well take advantage of it. Okay, so underneath the imagery, we have not only your name, but you have now the option to incorporate your pronouns. But underneath that, that's the key part that I'd really like to get onto next, because you'll see that I don't have my job title listed here. I have a series of skills, and we're going to go into that a little bit more. But the challenge that we have for you guys is to start thinking about, what would your skills be? Meaning that if I were to challenge you to come up with 15 to 20 skills that not only are the ones that you possess right now, but the ones that might be valuable in your desired industry, if you could start thinking about what those are, and then pick the skills that, might best represent you, putting them in your headline makes you very searchable. That means that if a recruiter was needing someone that is skilled in career services and is a leader, or looking for a director, my profile will likely show up a lot higher, just because I've incorporated not only leadership, but different varieties of career services, and then my industry, which is higher education. So if someone's looking for the next director in a career services, I'm going to likely show up a lot higher, just because of how I have my skills listed there. So I asked for, you guys to kind of brainstorm 10 to 15, or I said 15 to 20. We're going to go into where you can put the rest of them, because this is kind of just, only have the space to put at least 3 to 5 on there. I also discourage putting, job titles. Is perfectly fine if you want to have the job title there, but it does mean that you'd have to switch it up if you are changing industries, or if you have to change your job title multiple times. I prefer to kind of stick with the skills, just because those aren't necessarily changing. I might add to them or swap 1 or 2 out, but that's more consistent with who I am and what I'm bringing to the table, where it's not necessarily tied to a job title. Okay. The next thing to kind of keep in mind is, what if you're wanting to switch industries altogether? And we'll go into this conversation a little bit more tomorrow, when I'm having the talk that's surrounding career pivoting. But this one would be like, so say I want to switch gears and go into financial education. It's perfectly fine if I wanted to add the key, a phrase saying aspiring financial educator, or aspiring financial advisor, something that still puts you in that search engine for, if you're being searched for financial positions. But just because I don't have any formal training or formal roles in there, putting the aspiring clarifier will help keep it more accurate. Now you can go into more details down below, but it just says that you're not necessarily limited to only the skills that you have. You really want to start thinking about where you're going down the road, and what skills might be transferable, or the ones that you are working on developing further. So that way you have a chance of, being more active in that industry and being more engaged. Okay. So underneath that, you'll see that we have the location. Now, I have the Kansas City metropolitan area, and that's what I would encourage anyone to do, is meaning you find the larger workforce, so you find the larger area that has the higher number of positions, the higher, more opportunities, and connect yourself with that metro area. So rather than putting like Olathe or Lenexa or the smaller suburbs, attach yourself to the larger metro area. The reason that we suggest to do that is, again, all about searchability. If a recruiter is, say that a new company is starting up in Kansas City and they're looking for workforce in that area, there's no way they can account for every single suburb that might be of interest. That's, 45-mile radius that can be, that can be interested in that. So tying it to Kansas City metro area just opens that up for being found. So you can identify that wherever you're wanting to be. Or if you're planning on moving, say that I'm relocating to Denver, I'd want to make that switch on my LinkedIn profile pretty quickly, even in leading up to my job search, just so I can, again, start showing up in that search area. So that way we can start establishing my my network and my workforce over there. So if you know that you're going to be switching locations, or if you know that you're going to be heading in a different direction, just start thinking ahead and start planning out your LinkedIn profile to account for those changes in your life. Okay. The next section you'll see is, especially if you can be considered an active job seeker, that means that you are open to positions. And that button right here is the one for you. That means that when you select on here, you are the one that chooses that you are open to finding a job. From there, you can even dictate if you are going to be, I need to find a job right away, or select this one just saying I'm open to casually browsing. This is another way that recruiters, when they're searching for individuals, they might be searching for availability. And so you can choose to turn that on or off. The most important thing, though, is you can also decide who gets to see that information. So sometimes we might be job searching and we don't want boss to know about it. That's perfectly fine. You can dictate who wants to see it or who you want seeing it by selecting this option here. So if I were to be job searching right now, I'm new in my role, I have no interest in leaving, but if I were, I'd want to select maybe this one, because that way only the people who are actively hiring will see that I'm open to relocating or open to new positions. If you want to be a little bit more flashy or put yourself out there, you can opt to have the green frame on yours that says actively hiring or open to work, something like that. This one's kind of a hit and miss. I would suggest that even if you are an active candidate, if you're just starting out in your job search, try it without that frame, just because there's something about the psychology about desirability, meaning that the candidate who is less pushy and less available might be more desirable. Us career coaches know that it's a lot easier to find a new job when you're already employed. And so there is something that kind of plays to that if you want to kind of be considered more of a passive candidate, keeping that off would be my preference or my recommendation for you. Otherwise, once we get to maybe 2 to 3 month mark and you're not getting any leads, you're not having any luck in the job search site, then I would suggest maybe turning that on so it becomes more visible. Those within your network would be able to see that you're open to new positions. And so that's where you might want to decide if I'm ready to put that frame on my picture or not. If there are any questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to ask. As you can see, we're going to be breaking it down section by section. And so I don't want to leave one section if you have questions about it and you want to have those be addressed. The last thing that I'm going to note while we're on the profile section is up here on the top right. That means editing your URL. And just to know, everyone knows what a URL is. It is what is up here in the search bar. You can see mine is a lot more streamlined. When I originally started out LinkedIn, you will get a default URL that will have a bunch of numbers and letters associated with it. And that was just because of the sheer quantity of users that are on it. To change it, which this is recommended for anyone that might have a very common name or has one of those really long numbers, this is how you change it, is just by going in the edit feature, and then you can do a variation. Megan Rainey was already taken, so I added my middle initial in the middle. That makes it a lot easier for when I have to dictate to someone what my LinkedIn profile is, or if I wanted to include this on my application materials, like at the bottom of my resume, it's a lot easier to include a very short link or a one that's easily associated with my name. So that's just an easy thing that you can do to help make it a lot more shareable. Okay. So going back to the profile setting, we're going to move on to the About section. And this one I can guarantee you is probably going to be nobody's favorite, and that's perfectly fine. But it is a really good way of, again, sharing our skills and telling our professional story. So when you click on this section actually allows for, I think it's like 2,600 characters. So I'm only utilizing, I think 1,300. I didn't count. It shows you on here, meaning I could have this be twice as long as if I wanted to. I don't think that that's necessary for my career journey. Maybe if I, had a little bit more diverse work history, or if I, maybe incorporated teaching, and so I wanted to have two separate sections that really focus on that, then I might utilize the full 2,600. But you'll see right here, this is not one large block of text. That's for the ease of the reader. It's no different than when we recommend students in their resumes to not use the paragraph setting, but to use the bullet setting. So that way it's easier for you to read through each one. It's no different than having these very short paragraphs that kind of capture different parts of my professional story. So you'll see at the very beginning, I've got not only just what I'm currently doing, but just maybe some specialty areas. I also incorporated some anything that I thought might be outside of what's expected of my job. So just because I have a title of assistant director, people might not assume that I have any teaching experience, as it wasn't a formal role. But I just wanted to add that in there. And then right here, this last paragraph I have before we get into the specialty section, this is what I did before I even entered into the higher ed industry. So I started out my my career journey in insurance. And so I have a wealth of knowledge over, car parts and deductibles and claimants and all that sort of jargon and claim systems. But knowing that the industry I'm in now, that kind of knowledge doesn't necessarily hold much weight. So what I did is I identified what skills are transferable, meaning what would make sense from that industry, from what I learned, that can convey into this industry. And so you can see that the skills that I have listed here are not only customer service, empathy, thoroughness. I learned a ton about just customer service by being in that sort of environment. Those are universal skills. So those are the things that I kind of, want to carry with me, or will carry with me throughout the rest of my career. But I didn't want to necessarily get into the weeds of what I was responsible for when I worked in insurance. Again, you think about what's relevant towards the industry you're wanting to go into, and you think about what you already have. Then right here, you'll see this is just a word dump. There's literally no other way to describe it. When I ask you to come up with those 15 to 20 skills, and we are utilizing 3 to 5 up in our profile section, this is where you incorporate the rest of them. Again, this is just ways that I could incorporate in my paragraph. Some of them I kind of did or did something very similar. But with this one, it's really just ways of I can be searched for using any one of these terms. And so that's because they don't fall organically into paragraphs does not mean that they don't have a purpose or don't have a place in your LinkedIn profile. You still want to use them. Again, LinkedIn is a search engine. And so the more times that you have to showcase your skills on there, the better you'll show up and the higher you'll show up on someone's search specifications. Recruiters, when they're looking for something, sometimes they can get uber specific, especially if any one of you guys are in the tech field. Don't hesitate to list out all the tech skills that you have, all your programming language, all the systems that you're used to working with. This is a very appropriate place to kind of list where your specialty areas are. Then last, I just have my information again. This is a very simple way of just incorporating your email without having it be broadcasted to everyone. That means that I expect someone to find my email. It has to actually do a little bit more digging, but I don't want to make it hard for them to reach out to me. I am much more likely to be reached via my work email than I am a LinkedIn message. Just because as I'm not an active job seeker, I'm not actively checking my LinkedIn messages every single day, whereas my work email, I am checking multiple times throughout the day. So I just, want recruiters to know that if they want to get in touch with me, if they want to have an idea, or if they want to, collaborate in any ways, I want to make it easier for them to reach out to me. Are there any questions about this about section? Okay. I don't want to just breeze through everything. So I just want, I want you guys to take your time. As a note, at the end of this, I will have a checklist that I'm able to share out with you guys, just as a good one-sheeter for you to kind of compare your own LinkedIn profiles against. They will go out to anyone who registered for this event. If you're concerned that your email might not be on the registry, feel free to leave it in the chat and we'll make sure that you get a copy of the checklist as well. Okay. So I know that maybe some of the things that you might be thinking as well, those skills are great, but how on earth am I supposed to know, what skills are valuable or what's even out there? And that's where we're going to ask you guys to do a little bit more detective work. Thankfully, LinkedIn does have a tool specifically to help find skills, but I think it's actually a lot more impactful if you were to go out there and look through job descriptions. That means that you look through the job descriptions of not only your dream jobs, but maybe the jobs that you might progress to, what's next for you, and then maybe start comparing. I see this skill show up a lot, or I see this one being repeated multiple times. That's when you really have to identify if that's a skill that you already possess, whether it's maybe categorized in a different way, like my insurance skills can be considered something unique to that industry or something that's transferable, or the ones that that's what you need to work on and that's what you need to develop. Then you're able to help identify just different trainings or activities, or you may possibly a different education and what you need to work on to get to the place that you're wanting. But for finding those specialty areas, it is recommended that you actually do some digging for job descriptions. You can utilize the resources like jobscan.co that will help source a lot of the information as well. Or you can even enter it into word clouds and you can see if there's common terms that end up populating a lot more. So these are all different ways that you can kind of brainstorm what skills to include on here. Okay. Moving on, the featured section is just a bonus. This doesn't necessarily make me more searchable, but it does make me have a more complete profile. This is if you have any ties to any web pages or articles that you were involved in, that you were referenced in, then you can actually link directly to them. So what you can just kind of keep in mind is that you don't have control over the image. It'll just be whatever the image is associated with the website that you're linking to. But this is just a good way for you to kind of showcase if you've ever been, involved in something that maybe made some waves or maybe made a difference in your community. Even if it's, something that your company has published out there, if there's a web page for it, then it's something that you can link to through LinkedIn. That's a good reminder that up here in the in your about section, you can also link if you have a personal portfolio or a personal web page or an online portfolio. This would also be a very appropriate place to link your anything that you've created that's out there. Okay. The next is really getting into something that might seem a little bit more obvious, but there's different ways that we can enhance it. The activity section, the only way to change your activity is to actually be an active user. Something that I like to remind people is that that does not mean that you have to be out there creating original content over and over and over again. Your activity is anything that you are posting, anything that you are liking, or anything that you are sharing. So you want to remind or just kind of take note, especially if you are becoming a job seeker, if you think that you might want to be more active on there, maybe just set a calendar reminder to get on and maybe add a couple people to your network, or like a post, share a post, start following something new. That way you can show up as active. If you are not active and if you go a certain amount of time without being active, that's what that's going to display. I think it's like 90 days. It says Megan Rainey has not been active for 90 days. That's what we want to try to avoid. Again, it goes back to LinkedIn rewarding its active users. The more active you are on there, the higher you're going to show up in a search engine. the reasoning behind that is because LinkedIn doesn't want to connect recruiters with inactive users. If they're going to be showing someone or populating their search results, they want to ensure that the recruiter is being connected with someone who's going to see their information or see their message or be receptive to their invitation. And so becoming active and staying active is a good way of just making sure that you kind of keep to the forefront of your activity. Again, this isn't meant to intimidate anyone. You don't have to be out there creating these articles like some people are choosing to do. It can be simple liking and sharing that will help stay active within your profile. From here, we're going to go into the experience section. Now, this should look very familiar because it's very similar to your resume. The difference is you are not limited to a singular page, especially or 1 to 2 pages like we are with our resume, which has a lot of space issues and we're not able to expand. What you are able to do in your experience section is still get into what you're doing, what your responsibilities are, but you can also link to your company website or maybe a project that you've done. And I'm going to show you how we've done it here. So for my current position, I have not only just a brief synopsis at the very beginning saying what my office is responsible for, and I quantified it just based on the number of students that we serve. That gives anyone who's reading this just a little bit more context for who my audience is. Then I've put in bullet points. These are pulled directly from my resume. I maybe have tweaked a little bit of it, but not a ton. But I just want to have the information here that kind of showcases the same way with the resume. Each one of them is starting out with an action verb. Each one of them is conveying a responsibility or an accomplishment that I'm a part of actively. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And then at the bottom here, because I've been a part of multiple institutions, I thought it was impactful to actually link to UMKC's webpage. I've done that with my previous institutions, just again, to give them some context. I mentioned here that we serve over 12 schools and 300 student organizations. By providing them a link to the UMKC site, that means that they can actually see what schools those might be, what organizations they have. So it just helps provide some added context. You can see I've done the same with previous positions. As my positions I'm getting further removed from them, I'm less concerned about making sure that they each have the same information. Again, I've kept a lot of bullet points. I've kept anything that I've helped create or anything that would be important for them to see. And then we're really getting into way more past what I said. I got involved, it was in insurance, and you can see I have, I just devoted 4 bullet points to that one. I actually had multiple roles at Farmers Insurance over the 6 years, but I just stuck with my last role in the highest one, just to kind of convey that that's where I probably learned the most and carry that into my future role. You can still stack them. You'll see in my position at Park, I started out in one role and then I moved into a different. I kept that separate just because there's different skills utilized, whereas this one, for my insurance background, it was more just stacking and referring on top of that. So again, these bullet points are very similar to ones that I have in my resume. I might have minimized some just for space utilization, and I don't have the opportunity to link to any projects. And so that's what you can really take advantage of for LinkedIn. And even though I know I sound like a broken record, each one of these can be searchable terms. And so that's just one more way for you to incorporate and really start thinking about what you've worked on, how you want to be identified, and what we want to get involved in going forward. Okay. So the next part is your education. So everyone here who is a UMKC alum, you should be connected to UMKC on there. And it's very important, and we'll show you how when we get into the network side of things, but you do want to connect to your alma mater. And it's not something that you freeform. You want to make sure that you're selecting from the existing profile on there. And I'll show you the reason why here in a second. But just like our experience, we're going in reverse chronological order. That means that we have the most recent experience and the most recent education are at the top, and then our older experience and our older education fall down to the bottom. Licensing and certifications, that's kind of a same thing. You just make sure that you incorporate that. And then this is where I was talking about how LinkedIn has a tool to help us identify skills when we can get into like this take this skills quiz. That means that when you start looking into, I know I want to get into this industry, or I know I want to change things up, you can take a quiz of saying, I identify I have this skill, I have this skill, I have this skill, and it'll start prompting some suggestions. So those are just different ways that you can kind of think about if you're stuck and, you know, maybe you're sick of reading through job descriptions and you want to start getting like, you want some help in getting that, getting those skills provided, then that's just a good way for you to get the 20 skills that I'm asking you to start thinking about. Again, we want to make sure that we're connected to as many organizations that are that we're involved in. This will again play an important role, just like with our education. I'll show you guys just in a second. And then the last is just how you can kind of, a real quick way of staying active is just following individuals or companies or organizations that interest you. And you can see that for me, I'm following a lot of companies just because we like to stay active in who's hiring in Kansas City. So the Area Development Council, that's interesting to me just to see if there's any changes. Same with the Business Journal. And then just, you know, other interest things that I want to just keep tabs on. The more that I'm following, the more that I'm connected to, means that my feed is going to look differently. And so I'll show you what that means. That means that this is the primary place that you can see your feed. Anyone that I personally network with, that means that as part of my my network, or any organizations or things that I'm following, are going to show up on here. This makes it really super simple to just like or share or comment or something, makes it easy for us to stay active, because the more individuals that you're connected with, the more information is going to come through on your feed. And then I mentioned why it's so important to connect with UMKC or to connect with the different organizations. And that's because when you want to get into who is, you know, what you're following, or who is, if you're interested to know how you can grow your own network, let's take an example here about what that can look like. So of the companies that I'm following, let's check Barkley. So that's a advertising agency here in Kansas City. And right here, you can start to see from the people that work here, you'll be able to be connected to where they studied. So if they're connected to UMKC, like 16 of them are, then I have a good idea of who I'd want to connect with, or good prompts for growing my network. This is just one way of utilizing LinkedIn to help grow your network and see who's connected. It's really interesting when you meet someone that maybe has a shared identity as you, or has a shared background. They're going to be a lot more receptive to a connection that comes from you. And so this is just a good way for you to kind of see who's out there and what you have in common. You can also just do this if you're wanting to grow your network, and you can get an idea of who might be connected to you already. And then it'll also prompt suggestions of how you might know people from UMKC, or they might have different connections based on my interest group, people that went to my alma mater. Take advantage of this when you're growing your network. I think it makes a big difference. And again, the more active you're on there, the more that you go in and connect with someone or follow someone, the more engagement that you will show to have had. And again, you never know what connection will make a difference. If one of these individuals is connected to a job posting that I'm interested in, then that individual is going to see that they're connected with me. And so they might, you know, reach out a little bit differently, or they might be more receptive to having a conversation with you just because they see that they have a shared connection. And that is really all I had. I felt like I whizzed through that, so I hope if there's any questions, I'm here to help answer them. Like I said, I have created a checklist for you guys, so that way you can have that information and it can be shared. If you did not register for this through the alumni website, please make sure you send us your email or put it in the chat here, so that way we can make sure that you get our checklist. And that way we can make sure that you, you know, have all the information that we went over today. So are there any questions? Thanks, Kelsey.
Megan, I have a quick question to throw out there. some people might have. So we're on LinkedIn, minding our own business, and then all of a sudden we get a message from somebody saying, hey, we're invited to join LinkedIn Premium. What's the deal with LinkedIn Premium?
Excellent question. And I'm so glad you reminded me to bring this up. So LinkedIn Premium will allow you to have, let's say, like behind the curtain access to LinkedIn. Let's try to see so right here, you see on my analytics, I can see that my profile's been viewed 75 times. That means that 75 individuals might have seen it. But when I want to say like, well, who's creeping on me? And I click on it, it's going to say I can't have access to that without premium. So I will tell you, I don't necessarily see the return on the investment for LinkedIn Premium. Now, that might be different if you might be in a position of hiring individuals, or you might be in, you want to really have like a more executive type network. But for now, I think that there's enough benefits of just utilizing the free version of LinkedIn that I wouldn't necessarily encourage, certainly none of my students, to utilize the premium feature. And again, I'm not seeing the return on that investment for the times that I have utilized the premium side of things. So that's really the difference, is that you kind of get to see a little bit more on the analytics side. You also have access to the messaging feature called InMail. It's just their version of email. So it's a little bit different than just the messaging feature up at the top. So something to kind of keep in mind, that is the difference. LinkedIn's going to promote it because LinkedIn's a business, so I never forget that. But I don't necessarily think that they're holding too much of the good information for the premium members. I think that I can see the benefit for some, but not most.
Hey, Megan, I'm going to just jump in and make a slight plug for it. If you are actively and aggressively looking for a job, and especially if you're planning on using the job board within LinkedIn, which is an amazing job board, then it can actually be kind of beneficial, because it'll tell you some of the analytics that it does give you is telling you how good a match you are for the job that you're interested in based on what it's reading off of your profile. It'll tell you sort of how you compete with the other candidates who have already applied for the position. And it'll tell you also where you're missing some things. It'll tell you some of those key skills that other applicants have that you don't have. So it really allows you to go back then and adapt your profile so that you're a better candidate for the position. And that can be super beneficial. The other thing that I really like about the premium, if you're in aggressive job search mode, is it'll tell you how many people have applied for that job through the LinkedIn portal. So if I see that, because it'll tell me I'm in the top 10% of applying for this position, or I'm in the top 5%, or it tells me I'm not even in the top 50. And then if I see that 800 people have applied for that position and I'm not even in the top 50, I'm not going to waste my time. They're never going to look at me. But if I can see that I'm in the top 5% and maybe there's only 20 people who have applied, then I'm thinking I'm going to make a really solid effort with my application, because there's a really good chance that I'll get a call for an interview. So it does have some benefit. You always get 1 month free. And that's why I tell people, use it when you're like really aggressively looking. Sign up for that 1 month free and mark your calendar for when that 1 month is up, because it is kind of expensive. It's like $45, $50 a month.
Yeah.
So not to be messed with. I mean, don't just sign up for it just because you're curious. Sign up for when you're serious about your job search through LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you, Tess. Any other questions? Just to, again, plug our services, we, both offices do offer LinkedIn analysis or LinkedIn review appointments. So if you want a more in-depth check-in on your own profile, feel free to, reach out to us. You guys have the option of scheduling those appointments through Handshake, or you can reach out to us via email and we'll help you get that scheduled in Handshake. But the LinkedIn profile review is absolutely one of the services that we continue to offer. And just as a reminder for all of our alumni, our services do not expire with graduation. So we are here for you, wherever your career might take you 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, or you just need a lot of, reminders of what the industry is doing now. LinkedIn has even changed what it looks like in the last 2 years. You can now, it's one of the top places to search for remote positions. And so that's really getting, like I said at the beginning, really competitive with the job search platforms out there. So just kind of keep in mind that things are ever evolving. So just having fresh eyes on your information is never a bad idea. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm happy to hang out in the room for 15 more minutes in case there's anything that anyone wants to go over or see again. This information has been recorded, and so I'll make sure that Katie, our alumni coordinator, has access to it and can share it out if that's beneficial to you. And like I said, we'll be following up via email with the checklist so that way you guys can have the tools to make sure that your profile is looking as best as possible.